Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Tonight's show is sponsored by Nature Box, shipping great tasting and wholesome snacks right to your door. Forget the vending machine. You can start snacking smarter with wholesome, delicious treats like dark cocoa almond. Support the show and order a free Nature Box sampler box. Go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. That's free Nature Box snacks found right now at naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Forgive me, I jumped into this broadcast just a few minutes after doing one of those Facebook exchanges that you promise that you're not going to get yourself sucked into. You're watching somebody who's a religious friend or acquaintance and they post something and you look at it and you go, look, I'm not going to comment. It's not going to do any good. Nobody's listening. But then you look at it again and you go, the claim that they're making, the link that they just posted, the article, the thing that they are communicating is so vacuous. It is so factually wrong. Obviously factually wrong. I mean, somebody should say something. I'm not going to reply. Screw it. And I sit there and I reply, 5 paragraphs of rebuttal. And then there's a conspicuous pregnant pause. And then someone comes back and says, I don't know what happened to you in your life that caused you to be so wounded that you would reject God, but I will pray that you will find him. And the whole time I'm like, wait, whoa, wait a minute. I just said this, and I backed it up with this. Can we come back to the facts of the matter here? You know what? I've met Jesus, and he's just beautiful, and he's wonderful, and he loves me so much. By the way, this is a female. I reply, actually, the scriptures say that you are not qualified to instruct me in any way whatsoever. I shouldn't have even jumped in, right? 40 minutes of my life just gone. Nobody's mind has changed. But do you have those kinds of conversations in your brain? You think, if you don't say something, then these people are never challenged. Damn it, somebody needs to challenge them from time to time. At least let them know that there's people out here not drinking the Kool-Aid. So I went straight from that into the show. And I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for being a part of the broadcast. Thanks to everybody this last weekend at Free Flow in Orlando. An amazing weekend. Dr. Lawrence Krauss, the keynote speaker. Got a chance to do some short video with him as he talked about his film, The Unbelievers. I'm working on it. It'll probably post here next month. I'm waiting on my computer replacement. So, again, at any moment, we may see a blue screen of death and the broadcast may end. But Thursday, I think it is due to be delivered. Going to reconfigure the studio, and it is my hope that we'll have much cleaner audio and certainly fewer glitches by this time when we broadcast next week and do the Ghost Stories show. So thanks for your patience. I know there have been some fidelity issues regarding the audio. I'm doing what I can with what I have, but a solution is on the way. Saturday, going to be in Wichita at the Skeptics of Oz event, and it's free, and it's going to be awesome. You can go to skepticsofoz.org for all the details on that. I'm getting used to this. I bought one of those ergonomic keyboards. Started to feel this kind of slight numbness in my hands, right? It felt like a carpal tunnel type thing. I thought, well, as much time as I spend typing. So I a couple of days ago replaced the old keyboard with this ergo thing. And it took some getting used. I'm still getting used to it. Typing-wise, I'm doing fine, but when it comes to just like random buttons, I need the delete or the backspace, or I'm hitting a function key or the numbers or whatnot, I'm jacked. I can't find those damn things anywhere. I'm looking around. Where's the button? Where's the button? So anyway, do you use an ergonomic? Do you like it? I mean, do you get used to it? Because it's jacking up my chi here, people. I'm just not able. I need momentum, when I'm working. But they say if you can get over the, learning to use it and the repositioning of the hands, it's a good thing. So I'm hoping so. Real fast, let's talk about this Left Behind movie with Nicolas Cage. It has a 2% rating currently on Rotten Tomatoes, the movie review website. Since its release 11 days ago, it has grossed a whopping $11 million against its $16 million budget. It is tanking, and the critics are roasting it. Of course, we've been speaking about this film that's produced by the Duck Dynasty guy that's obviously a cashing in on religious messages, starring Nicolas Cage, who will apparently do anything for a paycheck. New York Magazine said in its review, Left Behind is biblical in its silliness. The New York Post said, featuring local cable production values and dialogue that seems written by a crack team of Sunday schoolers, director Vic Armstrong's Left Behind does no favors for the Christian proponents of its belief system. LA Weekly said it believes people might buy a ticket to Left Behind and not know the twist, like someone sitting down to watch Godzilla and being shocked by the entrance of a giant lizard. The USA Today says Left Behind seriously could have used some divine intervention. Hollywood Reporter, the rapture won't come soon enough. For the unfortunate souls forced to suffer through Left Behind. I mean, they are just roasting this film. By the way, if it has 2% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I just did a little bit of digging, some films out there that have been released publicly that have scored much higher on the Rotten Tomatoes meter include Jaws: The Revenge, Police Academy 6, Space Chimps 2, Zartog Strikes Back, After Earth, Showgirls, Ishtar, and the abomination that is the film Highlander 2. Ugh. Ugh. Saying the words Highlander 2 out loud just give me I just feel bile coming up in my mouth. One of those films that you pretend does not exist. It doesn't exist. It was never done. It was never created. The first Highlander, a classic. Highlander 2 is an affront to all that is good. Anyway, I thought there was kind of a justice to it. With home video and all that, I'm sure it will eke its way to profitability. 17 days to Halloween. Today the show is titled It Scares Me. We'll get into it after I say thanks to the sponsor of tonight's show. I'm not kidding, by the way. I got a message just a few days ago from a listener named Tony. Now, Tony had a big football party for the big OU Texas football game. And this is a big deal in my part of the country. This is as close as sports fans get to a religious experience if they're not religious. OU Texas is major. And he told me they served the Italian bistro pretzels from Nature Box at the party, and they were a huge hit. Then he sent me a message and just told me. Well, that's just awesome. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I got 2 words for you from Nature Box. Those words are free snacks. You can dump the candy bars, the foods that look like crackers or cookies, but really just a bunch of salt and preservatives, the potato chips, all that stuff. Just walk away and try out the great-tasting, wholesome snacks at Nature Box. Guilt-free satisfaction. 0 artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners. 0 trans fats. No high fructose corn syrup. You'll get snacks with no added sugar. There are options without gluten ingredients, perfect for the afternoon slump or the times when you're just hungry. You need a snack for the road, whatever. Try out the mocha almond bar, pumpkin spice nom noms, honey macadamia pretzel pops, French toast granola. Over 100 more to choose from. So much better than the other snack options. Right now, you have a chance to try Nature Box for free with a trial box filled with 5 of their most popular snacks. So start your free trial right now. Go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Your free trial awaits. naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. And thanks for supporting this show. Greatly appreciated. It's an article by Lisa Fritcher. Now, she has a BA in psychology from the University of South Florida. She's also a mental health expert and wrote an article about the psychology of fear. understanding the dynamics of the fear response. So before we get into what scares you and what scares me, let's talk about fear and maybe get educated about some of the science of fear. We'll have articles like these peppered throughout the show. Lisa's article says this. It was, by the way, published at CBC News Canada on October 31st, Halloween Day, back in 2007. Fear is a powerful and primitive human emotion. It alerts us to the presence of danger and was critical in keeping our ancestors alive. Fear can actually be divided into two stages, biochemical and emotional. The biochemical response is universal, while the emotional response is highly individualized. The biochemical reaction. When we confront a perceived danger, our bodies respond in specific ways. Physical reactions to fear include sweating, increased heart rate, and high adrenaline levels. This physical response is sometimes known as the fight or flight response, in which the body prepares itself to either combat or run away. This biochemical reaction is likely an evolutionary development. It's an automatic response, and it's crucial to survival. Now, the emotional response. The emotional response to fear is highly personalized. Some people are adrenaline junkies, thriving on extreme sports and other fear-inducing thrill situations. Others have a negative reaction to the feeling of fear, avoiding fear-inducing situations at all costs. Although the physical reaction is the same, fear may be perceived as either positive or negative. An entire Halloween industry has been built on people's enjoyment of fear. The majority of people avoid situations in which there's a high risk of actual injury, yet they enjoy the experience of being scared in an environment that's actually safe. Horror films are another example of this phenomenon. Repeated exposure to similar situations leads to familiarity. This greatly reduces both the fear response and the resulting elation, leading adrenaline junkies to seek out ever new and bigger thrills. It also forms the basis of some phobia treatments, which depend on slowly minimizing the fear response by making it feel familiar. One aspect of anxiety disorders can be a tendency to develop a fear of fear. Where most people tend to experience fear only during a situation that's perceived as scary, those who suffer from anxiety disorders may become afraid that they'll experience a fear response. They perceive their fear responses as negative, and they go out of their way to avoid those responses. A phobia is a twisting of the normal fear response. The fear is directed toward an object or situation that does not present a real danger. The sufferer recognizes that the fear is unreasonable, yet cannot help the reaction. Over time, the fear tends to worsen as the fear of fear response takes hold. Phobia treatments that are based on the psychology of fear tend to focus on such techniques as systematic desensitization and flooding. Both techniques work with the body's physiological and psychological responses to reduce the fear. In systematic desensitization, this client is gradually led through a series of exposure situations. For example, a client with a fear of snakes may spend the first session talking about snakes. Slowly, over subsequent sessions, the client would be led through looking at pictures of snakes, playing with toy snakes, and eventually handling a live snake. This is often accompanied by learning and applying new coping techniques to manage the fear response. Flooding is a type of exposure technique, but it can be quite successful. In flooding, the client is exposed to a vast quantity of the feared object or situation until the fear diminishes. It's important that such confrontational approaches be undertaken only with the guidance of a trained mental health professional. These are potentially traumatic techniques. However, in some circumstances, they have an excellent rate of success. I'm reminded of a friend of mine. He was terrified of heights. He told me this story personally. Really scared of heights. And his dad said, "We're working on the roof." And he's like, "Dad, I don't want to, I can't. I'm afraid of heights. I don't want to go." And his dad said, "You're going to overcome your fear and I get your ass up there." And I mean, the guy just white knuckle terrified. And his dad says, "Get up there." And he says it helped him. I'm not sure it was the approach I would have taken. I think there's probably a healthier way to approach it. You throw somebody in the deep end, make them swim. Is that truly the best way to teach someone how to swim and to help them overcome perhaps a fear of drowning? I kind of doubt it. Stephanie sent a message in and said this: long story short, in regard to irrational fears, I absolutely cannot stand driving on bridges over water. It's terrifying to think that they might topple over when my itty-bitty little car drives over them. I'm from the Midwest, so it might stem from the I-35 collapse in Minneapolis-St. Paul. Geez, we had one of those, I think, on I-40, Stephanie, years ago. People didn't see that the bridge had been hit by a barge. Part of it was knocked out, and I think it was dark. They're just cruising right along, and all of a sudden, before you know it, they plummet 100 feet into the drink. One guy had a horse trailer. A bunch of people drowned, and the horses drowned as well. I understand your fear. She says, I have panic attacks. I feel so anxious. My palms sweat. I can't breathe. The only way I can combat it is to shut my eyes and pretend I'm somewhere else. If I'm the one driving, oof-da. Heck, even writing this makes me feel like my lungs are in a vice. So I guess my examples of I-40 probably didn't help. I'm sorry. By the way, oofta, you give yourself away. You're from up north. My dad's from up there, and that's a common thing. I thought it was Canadian, though. Was it just up north in the States, or is it Canadian? Oofda, the exclamation. She said, I know it's all in my head, but that doesn't change the fact the fear is still there. Maybe someday I'll grow out of it, but for now I'll be content sticking my head down, closing my eyes, plugging my ears, pretending I'm on a nice sandy beach with an umbrella drink in my hand. Stephanie, hang in there. Stuart said, I live in Australia, the country where everything can kill you. But even though we all laugh at the joke, it has its roots in truth, as we are indeed home to some of the most venomous snakes and spiders in the entire world. When I was younger, about 6, I was bitten by a spider, not just any type of spider. It was the Sydney funnel web spider. If you're not familiar with them, imagine a cross between a black widow and a Brazilian wandering spider. It was a thoroughly painful and unpleasant experience, however. Thanks to modern medicine, I was fine. But since then, I've been arachnophobic. The mere sight of a spider, be it real or just a photo, big or small, could cause me great fear or trigger a panic attack. Even just writing parts of this email causes me to shudder a bit. But like I said, it was since that event I've been arachnophobic. As if I try to remember a time before that day, I can't recall ever having been scared of spiders. Arachnophobia is not that uncommon of a fear, quite the contrary. It may be one of the most prevalent fears among humans. Can you blame us for having such a fear? I mean, have you ever really looked at a spider? Like stopped and examined one? They're hideously unnerving things, all those legs and eyes, and the fangs ready to pump you full of venom. They're not a pretty sight to behold. So why then was I not afraid of them until that day? These trains of thought have given me a deep fascination of fear. While you'd imagine that being scared is something you generally try to avoid, we as a species seem to love scaring ourselves with horror books, movies, and games. For me, studying literature and our reactions to fear provides an interesting insight to the human psyche and how to control it. It's through this study that I hope to conquer my fear of spiders so that I may control it instead of it controlling me. And I do believe it's having an effect, as I'm able to, quote, tolerate little spiders. Well, most of the time. Stuart, thanks so much. I like the idea of looking at it clinically, educating ourselves about what fear is, the difference between rational and irrational fears, fear responses, acclimation, those types of things. I think that's way smart. Area code 314. You're on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, it's Brooke.
Brooke, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Do you like Halloween? Do you enjoy this time of year as we talk about spooks and scares and fears and that kind of thing?
I do. I love Halloween, but I have a kind of original fear. So I'm kind of scared of one of my college professors.
Okay.
Yeah, she is like the most unfriendly person you will ever meet. And in class, she's like very monotone and never smiles. And she kind of has like a constant glare on her face. So when you see her like on campus, she'll never like acknowledge you or anything. And she always kicks people out of class. And I'm always scared I'm going to get kicked out.
Even though you're behaving well, you have a fear that you'll be singled out and ejected from the room?
Yeah, because she does it all the time. She's done it 7 or 8 times this semester already.
You know, that's kind of like when you're driving the speed limit and you see a police officer in the rear view mirror and you're always afraid you're going to get pulled over or ticketed for something even though you are obeying the law. That'd be an equivalent of that? Is that how you feel? I'm doing it right, but at any moment she's going to call my name and I'm hosed.
Right. And the only time she's ever actually smiled is when we had an assignment to like write our favorite quote on the board. And I wrote mine, the famous Christopher Hitchens quote, "Take the risk of thinking for yourself." And she was like, "You know who Christopher Hitchens is?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "That is my favorite quote. I've never met a student who knew who he was before." And I was like, "Okay." So I think she likes me, but I'm still scared.
She might not be all that scary if she's a fan of the Hitch. I like her already. So, do you have any other types? I mean, we talked about spiders. That's the easy one. You're not scared of the dark. You're not scared of clowns. I mean, none of that stuff hits you.
Not really. I mean, I'm kind of scared of Oblivion, but that's a bigger one.
Oblivion?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. We're not talking about the fear of death, but the fear of non-existence. There will be no Brooke anymore. That scares you?
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Why?
Like, I don't know. Like, I know there was no me like 20 years ago, so it should be no big deal, but it's just weird to think like I won't be able to like think anymore or do anything or eat ice cream or talk to my sister or anything like that.
I think I have those thoughts not in terms of fear, but more of a lament. Like, I don't know that I'd want to live forever. But the idea, what was it that Hitch himself said something like, it's not that the party's over, it's that the party will continue and you have to leave. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
That's
yeah,
kind of
I
a
felt
lament.
it too.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, you're awesome. It's great to hear your voice. It's been a long time. For those who don't know, she's a regular listener to the show. And I think, as I remember right, you and I share a birthday, right?
Yes, we do.
That's right. And
we're totally the same age.
We're yeah. I got shoes older than you, Brooke. It just, when you're like, there was no me 20 years ago. Tons of us in the audience just went, oh God. Brooke, you're awesome. You got nothing to be scared of out there. So you keep your head up and happy Halloween. And thanks for being a part of the broadcast.
You too. Thanks for having me on.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye.
A lot of people are afraid of non-existence. I mean, I get that. For me, though, I think it's more of I love life. I just want to be here for it. I want to be here to experience it. It's not that I fear non-existence. Who was it who gave the quote that, I wasn't here billions of years before the day of my death, and it didn't bother me in the slightest? Was it Twain, I think, who said something along those lines? But the fear of oblivion is a big one I see from the chat room. Many people echo Brooke's sentiment. Justin said, I have a huge phobia of mirrors. This is probably because I've seen too many horror movies. When I walk past one, especially at night, I can't look at it. The thought of possibly seeing someone or something behind me terrifies me. There's a full-body mirror on the outside of our bathroom door, and if I have to use the bathroom at night, I close my eyes and push the door open. After that, there's another one facing me above our sink. Using the light helps, but it still freaks me out. On top of this, I can't look outside of a window for the same reason. There could be someone standing outside looking in. It doesn't control my life, but it does get annoying. Justin, have you seen that YouTube compilation of all these scary movies where there's a mirror reveal? You see the protagonist and they close a mirror door or they close a cabinet door with a mirror on it. And it's like that scene at the end of Fatal Attraction. She closes the cabinet door in the bathroom in the mirror and bam, there's Glenn Close behind her with a knife. And there's a compilation of tons of these sort of mirror reveals. And maybe you shouldn't look it up. But it's out there for anybody else who is curious. Samantha said, I'm 29 years old and I'm still terrified of opening my bedroom door into the dark hallway in the middle of the night. I'm always certain there will be a serial killer standing there with a knife. There never is. I'm not sure what I would do if there was. It's the same when looking out the window into the yard at night. I don't like to do it because I'm scared there will be a dark shape standing there watching. Too much Criminal Minds before bed, I guessed. Love, love, love the show. Thanks for all that you do. Samantha, thanks so much. I feel the same. That scene in John Carpenter's Halloween, looking out the window and you see the shape out there with the tiny little white Michael Myers mask. There's something about that. Best scares are in the imagination, right? It's not what is happening, it's what might happen. That's the stuff that really cooks your noodle. Matthew said, you asked for us to share our rational and irrational fears. I thought I'd share my fear. Everyone tells me it's an irrational one. I suppose deep down I know it is. Unfortunately, this knowledge does not make this fear any less real. I must first tell you I find very little to be fearful. I have minor fears which I can deal with, but they all seem to be based on other contributing factors. I'm not crazy about heights. However, as I've grown older, I've come to realize my childhood fear of heights was because of vertigo. I remember as a child feeling unsteady and having a sense of falling whenever I'd look over the edge of a height. The feeling has basically subsided. I'm able to enjoy the St. Louis Arch, views from skyscrapers, roller coasters, etc. I have a fear of deep water. But even at age 46, I'm a very poor swimmer. I can float, and as long as one of my children doesn't jump on me, I can enjoy deep water that way. Those fears are minor and to a degree understandable, given my childhood vertigo and inadequate swimming skills, but I have only one true debilitating fear. I must also inform you, this is quite a setup, by the way. I must also inform you that I spent several years on the field of animal control. By the way, thanks for all you've done for homeless animals. Well, yeah, I'm an animal lover. I've gone alone into a hotel room filled with pepper spray, thanks to anxious cops and a vicious pit bull. I've also entered a hotel room containing 3 very large growling teeth-bared Rottweilers and came out unscathed. And with all the animals in custody, I've literally dove to capture, or not sometimes, charging dogs, pigs, even a 4-foot monitor lizard. I've climbed 20 feet up a tree to rescue a 4-foot-long iguana. I've impounded a 15-foot-long reticulating python, an alligator, foxes, coyotes, various other snakes, even tarantulas and scorpions. I once lowered myself into a 6x6 pit and had somebody close the lid just so I could capture a red fox. I've handled, rescued, impounded, released various birds of prey, skunks, raccoons, etc. I've been bitten and scratched by snakes, dogs, cats, birds, bats, ferrets, lizards, and rodents. I had to leave the job in 2009 for a more sedentary job as the injuries I would sustain took longer to heal the older I became. I say all of this to let people know I'm not a man who's easily scared. I intend to remind my wife and children of this whenever they taunt me for my irrational fear, but it falls on deaf ears. I call my fear, holy shit, it's like a 12-syllable word. Tenoderasinesis. Man, you're going to have to call and pronounce that for me. Tenoderasinesis phobia. I had to make up the name because there's no official title. I took the hideous creature's Latin name and added phobia to it, simple as that. What is this one truly debilitating fear of mine, you ask? It is the horrifying Tenodera sinensis, or the praying mantis. He continues, even thinking about them gives me the willies. I hate them. Do not like looking at them. I feel embarrassed afterwards when I run from them like a scared little child. I spent time as a supervisor of a highway work crew. One of the workers brought one of those creatures, a very large specimen, to show me, not knowing my fear. My freak out caused him to freak out, and the beast flew from his hands and landed right on me. I spun in circles, yanking off my jacket, cussing and screaming. I had to contain myself to keep from firing him on the spot. Later, embarrassment set in as I realized I'd acted that way in front of the entire crew. In Kokomo, Indiana, there's a large metal sculpture of a praying mantis. Why? Beats the hell out of me. Even that thing sends chills down my back. Matthew, Thanks for the message very, very much. By the way, if you have a fear, a phobia, something that scares you for rational or irrational reasons, call the switchboard and tell us about your phobias, your fears, what scares you here on the radio. Right now, I've got area code 505. Thanks for calling. You're on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. It's Keith. I have this really weird, almost ability when I'm driving that if I have an old truck and when I have a weird bump or something doesn't go right, it's like a bookmark gets put in my mind. And when I'm sleeping, I have a dream of, if you want to know what it would look like when it went bad, here's what that is. So that's, I have that fear of things going bad all the time with my truck.
Like something going wrong with your truck that will lead to an accident, or just something in general?
Like, no, just the wheels are going to fall off. This is going to break. The engine's going to explode at any moment, even though it's fine.
What's that about? I mean, has it always since you started driving?
No, it's just this truck because it's from 1992.
It's like Christine, huh? It's like this particular vehicle freaks me out. Is that it?
Yeah, it's like everything seems to work out A-okay because I take care of it, but still, it's that it could just be the bad roads in my area seem to exacerbate the condition. I don't know why that happens, but it's always like I hit a speed bump, and it was a real dip in the road speed bump, and this car just beyond it had pulled way too far out into the street. So the mental image that night was, had it actually happened, here's what it would look like. You would have spewed that car across the lawn right there. I'm like, oh, I don't need to see this. I don't need to see this. But that's just one of those weird effects of when I'm driving. If I could talk about two classes of fears, ones that I can't do anything about and ones I can try. The fears I can't control are all cosmological events that will end not only my life, but every life on this planet and probably the planet.
We talking about the asteroid, that kind of thing?
Gamma ray bursts, neutron stars exploding. Just, you're going to see it coming way too late, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Does the Ebola scare resonate with you at all? Everybody's flipping out about Ebola. Does that bother you?
No.
Me neither. I don't know why. I mean, statistically, I understand why. But the fact that it's in every headline, it's just like Ebola fever is everywhere in the United States.
That's ironic, is that my fear of things that scare me that I can try and do stuff about is this, you need a headline, you need that pizzazz, you need that thing to scare people or that, just to frighten them enough to want to click on it, and then you're just feeding them BS because it has nothing to do with reality.
Sensationalistic media, are they spiking this thing just for hits and for ratings, you think?
Yes. When I did see the news report about that nurse who treated the guy in Dallas contracting it, and she's doing okay, it seems, they showed there was a breach in the protocol to prevent her from being contacted with the virus, but she broke it.
Yeah.
So there was a realistic reason why she got it, and she's being treated for it. So that Ebola does not scare me.
Well, my friend, I appreciate you listening, and thanks for being a part of the broadcast tonight, and I hope the Halloween holiday is good to you, my friend.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, take it easy. Had an email in from David. David said that he has a fear of cotton balls. He said, I have no idea where it stems from, but the sight of a cotton ball or touching one just sends my brain into a panic. Can literally throw me into a full-blown panic attack. My wife has to remove nail polish or use a cotton ball in a separate room. Let's see. Lindsay says, I have a phobia, appropriately named megalophobia, a fear of extraordinarily large objects. I'm not talking about trees or large skyscrapers, but rather anything unusually large that would not regularly be so, such as the biggest statues or objects seen along roadside attractions or carnivals. I've tirelessly tried to recount my childhood, trying to find moments that may have created this fear, but I haven't figured it out yet, nor do I think I ever will. As a traveler, I'm pretty aware of where these large things are often found, but every now and then I'm taken off guard and I'm faced with this fear. I tremble while others laugh. Lindsay, what are we talking about? I mean, are you talking about like the Paul Bunyan statue? Are we talking about the Ferris wheel at the fair, that kind of thing? The giant Ferris wheel as it turns, everybody else is smiling and having a good time, and you feel real fear. Kylie said, I'm deathly afraid of grasshoppers. Their big eyes and the way that they sit perfectly still until they jump on you is the stuff of nightmares. If Satan were real, I'm convinced he would manifest not as a red guy with a pitchfork, but as a huge grasshopper with twitchy mandibles and bulging eyes that peer into your soul. I think the writers of the Bible would agree with me. Why else would they write in locusts as one of the plagues of Egypt? Pure evil, I tell you. Kylie, thanks so much for sharing your fear. Area code 678, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, sir. This is Katie.
Thanks so much for calling the show tonight. As we gear up for Halloween, we're talking about the things that scare us. So what scares you?
Well, these things don't scare me anymore, but as a 4-year-old, I was absolutely terrified of two things. We lived back in the sticks in the foothills of the Appalachians, and we had yard chickens, and the neighbors had a TV, so I got to watch a little bit of cartoons enough to see the eagles come down and get the cartoon characters. And I was quite sure the chicken hawks would take me off the same way they did the chickens and my puppy. And my other great fear was the fear of getting chicken pox. I was quite sure that if I did, that the chickens would chase me and peck me to death.
Forgive me for laughing.
I wouldn't even
I'm
go
sorry.
outside and play by myself.
So wait a minute. Now you have chicken pox, and that causes the chickens to clue in on you. They become focused on you.
Yeah, I was quite sure of that.
And then they would chase you down and they would peck you to death.
Absolutely.
So it's like Hitchcock's The Birds with chickens.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, except for it was little banty chickens, too. They weren't even big chickens. It was a little yard scratchy.
Hey, you know what? For a kid, that can be pretty scary. Pretty scary.
It was. I wouldn't go outside by myself. I'd make it out to the porch and say, no, I don't think so. I think I'll just play in the house.
All right, so we're walking along, and chicken walks up in front of you. Do you have a reflex? Do you flip out? Is that...
If there was a grown-up with me, I was fine.
No, I'm talking about now. We're cruising along. You and I are walking the sidewalk.
I love chickens now. If it's a creature of some kind, I love it to death. All my dogs are rescues, and if I had the bucks to put up a nice chicken house that I could keep them away from the coyotes or keep the coyotes out, I would love to have chickens because they're great.
Well, you've overcome.
Oh yes. The only thing that worries me if which we can still do that here, wander around in the woods and come up on an old house place where, it's all caving in. The only thing that worries me there is somewhere around that old house is a well, and it may or may not be covered. Yeah, that's a valid fear.
Yeah, it's like I always think of Samora in the film The Ring, which was scary the first time I saw it, and now it's not scary at all. Maybe that's the familiarity they were talking about. But stuff down in a well that may or may not be covered, the old house in the woods, all of those things. A breeding ground for fear. Well, I'm glad you've overcome your chicken phobia, my friend.
Me too. and the hawk phobia. The hawks will get me. I knew they would.
That's awesome. Well, hope you have a wonderful October and a happy Halloween, okay?
Oh, you too, and thank you for little Henry.
Oh, for those who don't know who Henry is, he's our little rescue dog we got last March from a puppy mill. And I mention him from time to time, along with Rat Dog and Cat and all the critters in my house. But Henry has sort of become, he has a special place in the hearts of the audience. When I was in Orlando, Florida this weekend, several people came up and asked about him. And so thank you. Thanks for the kind words. He's doing great, and he's surrounded by love, okay?
Thank you so much. And give him a belly rub for me.
Belly rub coming up. Take it easy, all right?
Thank you.
I'll tell you something that scares me. Losing Henry. Or any of my animals. It was last week. Let me back up. The short story on Henry, and if you know this, forgive me, I'll just take a second. He was part of a puppy mill, which is a breeding place where they keep all these animals just locked in these small cages, and they treat them horribly, and they exist to breed. And he had been caged for about 8 years, is our estimation. There was over 100 dogs in a single mobile home. And when the Humane Society discovered them, they were just in deplorable shape. And so Natalie and I decided we were going to go and find a companion here for our little dog. And we wanted to do a rescue. And so they brought out little Henry, a little 3.5-pound Chihuahua Yorkie mix, little bitty thing, fits in your hand. And his hair is just overgrown all over his body, and his eyes you can't even see. His claws are just, they're so long, they're just rounded around. As you can feel rib cage, he's emaciated. He doesn't have any hair on his nose because it's obvious he'd been sticking his face through the bars of a cage and it just rubbed all the hair off his nose. There's no hair on his tail, little splotches of, just horrible health. And he was like a shell, okay? And we decided that he was our choice, and we took him home, and over the course of several days, we sort of brought him back to life. And he has become one of the great joys of our life and a member of this family. And I did a short video about him that I put on YouTube called Saving Number 90. 90 was the number that was on his collar. And he is, I can't tell you how much joy that animal gives me, just to see him blossom, to see him run around the house and play and chew on chew bones and have good meals and sleep in a soft bed and sit on a lap and get his tummy rubbed. And to know that 8 years of being sort of ignored and neglected in this cage, of being a number, being a statistic, and now he's part of a family, and that he is getting all the love that he did not get before. I tell you, this is the absolute truth. When we first picked Henry up, he and many of the rescue dogs would move their paws like they were swimming, like the doggy paddle, when you would just pick them up and hold them. And it's because the animals had not been held and did not really know how to respond. And so they did a swimming motion, a paddling motion when you grabbed them and you held them up in your arms. And it just broke the heart. Well, last week I had fed the animals in the morning, and I couldn't find him 10 minutes later. I didn't know where he was, and he's always either with me or with Natalie. I'm walking around the house, right? 8 o'clock in the morning. Henry, where you at? Henry, nothing. And the door to one of the rooms is cracked, and I walk in, and he is slumped over on the ground. He's leaning kind of over this shoe. There's a shoe on the ground, and he was motionless. His body was stiff. His jaw was clenched shut. His eyes were glazed over. It looked like he was not alive, okay? And I freaked. I'm not a panicky person. Normally, I'm good in a crisis. I just panicked. Baby, what's wrong with Henry? What's wrong? I pick him up, and he's not moving. It doesn't look like he's breathing. Oh, he had a heart attack. Did he find something? Did he choke on it? What's happening? And we put him on the bed, and we see some, we pry his mouth open to make sure he didn't get a button or something lodged in his throat. He's a tiny dog. Small thing could get in there, and I'm calling the emergency vet. What do we do? Rushing him up there, and he's alive. He is breathing. He's just frozen, And I get there, and I'm in the room. The vet is very good. Runs right in to find out what's going on, and he asked me what happened, and I started to tell the story of the condition I found him, and I just started sobbing. I couldn't speak. I just started weeping. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Give me just a second. I'm grabbing the Kleenex, and Henry's there. He's doing a little bit better by the moment. I'm so sorry. Hang on just a second. Finally, I recover. My face is all swollen. I'm jacked up. And I told him all about the incident, and apparently he had some kind of a seizure, which I guess is common in dogs. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen never again. We haven't seen it happen since. And we are watching him, and they're saying, well, they did some blood work and whatnot. But they said just keep an eye on him, and if he goes into another seizure, just try to keep him away from hard, edgy, sharp objects, try to keep him in a place where he's safe and won't hurt himself until it is over. It is often more traumatic for the owner than it is for the animal, and they were trying to alleviate our fears. And that's a fear of mine. It's huge, of losing Henry and, or any of the animals. You know what that's like? Losing any loved one? I mean, that's a fear. And that really rattled my cage. It took me a day to kind of recover. I'm just such a pushover anyway. But something about his story and what he's been through. And when I walked in and thought he had died in my house, and I'm afraid, I'm afraid I'll walk in and see him seizing on the ground. And, oh my God, Well, I'm hoping I'll handle it better. I'm hoping that I'll actually be able to say this is a seizure and now I can handle it. I have a plan. I've developed a plan. I'm all good. But those of you who've been through that, you know what I'm talking about that first time, don't you? You walk in and you just think, what is happening? So that's a fear of mine. Rebecca said, since I was a kid, I've been terrified of being trapped or having no escape. I can remember having nightmares about being chased, not being able to get away from my pursuer. But since this is Halloween, I thought you might enjoy hearing about a more recent fear, and yes, I know this is just in my head, she says. Let me explain. I've lived on my own since I was 20. It's never once bothered me. I'm a very independent woman. Like I said earlier, I'm not usually afraid. However, this changed 4 years ago. I bought my first ever house. I've been very proud of this house, and I just love it. It feels like a log cabin with its hardwood floors and wood paneling on the walls. As soon as I first saw this house, I knew I wanted to buy it. I moved in just before Christmas. I was quite happy to have it. After I moved in, I realized a few unexpected things. First of all, it's very dark at night. While I do live in a town, it's a very small town in Kentucky, and at night it feels like I'm actually in the middle of nowhere. The only floodlight seems to be set on a motion detector. It keeps coming on and off during the night. I'm guessing as small animals go near it. Also, my neighbors have dogs. They're normally very quiet until someone goes into one of our backyards. Now, while these two facts are a little unsettling in the middle of the night, both can be explained by the random squirrel. I was in quite a hurry to move in and get settled before the start of January that first year because I'm a tax accountant. And tax season starts January 2nd. I learned about the dogs and the floodlight combo pretty quickly because from January to April I don't usually sleep well. It's quite common for me to wake up several times during the night and to have very bad dreams. I've always considered this a part of my high-stress job, and I never put much thought into it, except in February of that year. One night I was tossing, and I heard the dog start to bark, which I still wasn't used to. So I decided to just get up and read for a bit, but when I opened my eyes, there was someone in my bedroom. I remember her perfectly. She was tall, black, and looked murderous. I've never been so scared in my life. I remember wanting to pray. It was an automatic response to my fear. One that had been trained into me since I was a child, except I was already a non-believer at the time, and I was quite angry with God. I've grown out of that now, LOL. But then I angrily thought, what help could God give me? How many people die from home invasions every year? I knew I'd just be another statistic, that no deity was going to bother saving me, so I stubbornly refused to pray for help. I literally had no idea what to do. My cell phone was near me, but it was 3 feet away. She was 3 feet away. She'd see me move long before I'd ever be able to call for help. I thought I was going to die. So I did the only thing I could think of. I closed my eyes and hoped she didn't notice I was awake. I don't remember how long I laid awake, literally afraid for my life. I know that I eventually fell asleep, and when I woke up, there was no sign of anyone having been in my house. All the doors and windows were still locked. Nothing was out of place, and a thorough search of my house showed that I really was alone. Upon reflection, I remembered she was wearing tattered clothing from the 1800s, and I concluded it was just a dream. As a rational person, I know now that this was just a very vivid dream. and that I'm perfectly safe. But I've never been able to shake the feeling that I'm not alone in that house. Every little sound will make me jump, and I don't leave my bedroom once I turn in at night. I'm currently planning on selling it next spring. Rebecca, thank you so much. Area code 210, you're on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Beatrix.
Beatrix, thanks for calling the broadcast tonight. We're talking about the things that scare us, whether it's for rational or irrational reasons. What do you have for us tonight?
Well, my main fear is really pretty much if something happens, if both my husband and I die, basically my daughter. So since my husband doesn't feel that anyone in his family is up to snuff to take care of her, and my family's too old.
How old's your daughter?
She's 4.
I see. So she needs us to protect her, to take care of her, to provide for her. And you take that so seriously that you worry that one day you wouldn't be there?
Yeah.
Is it a debilitating fear, or is it just something that kind of nags at you in the back of your mind?
It more like it nags at me at the back of my mind because, if something happens and I know she would get to my parents, and I know my parents aren't up to snuff to do it. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's nothing you have to worry about, Beatrix. I'm sure you are going to be fine, and I'm glad your daughter has you. I think that's awesome.
And another thing I was afraid of was calling the show.
Because your host is so intimidating, or because you don't like to speak in public, or what? What drives that?
No, because your voice is too perfect.
Oh, just stop. Just stop. Beatrix, you're great on the radio. You're communicating very well. You're good at telling the story. You did fine. So, and the more you do it, the less afraid you become of it. So you should call more radio shows, and before you know it, it'll be nothing. You won't even blink, okay?
Indeed, and thank you, Seth.
All right, take care of yourself and have a happy Halloween, all right?
You too.
All right, take care. Fear of public speaking is a big fear. I know a lot of people. It's funny, people often ask me if I ever get stage fright. I do a lot of this in public speaking type stuff. And now, not at all. But when I first started, when I was in school, I was a teenager, I was terrified. My legs would shake, my hands would shake, and my voice would quiver. I would lock my legs when I was on stage so that no one could see that my right foot, was just like tick, 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 tick. It was just absolutely... I looked like I was holding on to a jackhammer. And I would try to get my voice, and I would, and I was trying to be cool on the outside. And I was, ninth grade, something like that, when I first started. And it took me a few times to get over it. I'll tell you another fear. I was flying to Orlando. I fly a lot, right? You probably know what that's like. You're on a plane quite a bit. If you travel for work, you get it, right? And you know that it's statistically like one of the safest ways to travel. I mean, you think about just the sheer number of people who travel safely via jets from here to there all around the world. And statistically, you're golden. It's good. You're in a safe place. There's a storm, hey, whatever. High winds, whatever. If there's a technical problem, whatever. I mean, there are fail-safes, there's redundancy, you've got professional pilots at the wheel, you've got all these things going on, whatever. Right? Statistically, it is a safe way to travel. We're flying to Orlando. I'm going through the Houston connection, and there's some kind of weather going on outside of Houston on Friday. And we got kicked around the skies like we were a Dixie cup. Like you were hitting solid objects in the air. Bam, 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 left, right. And then the ones where the turbulence causes the plane to drop from underneath you. I mean, your stomach is up here, your body is down there. And everybody in the plane goes, woo! Everybody's a little freaked out. The lady next to me, we went sheet white. We went through 20 minutes, 30 minutes of this, just nonstop, but about 10 of them were very intense. And logically I know, we're good. We are safe. But I was scared. I did. I had a little bit of sweaty palms going on. You ever feel that in a plane? You feel that little vibration, that pre-turbulence, you feel the thing, and all of a sudden, boom, you start getting kicked around the sky. It feels like you're just, you feel like you're Dorothy's house in the tornado in The Wizard of Oz. You're looking out the window. What's going on? Like looking out the window helps. Who was the comedian? Was it Bill Engvall who said, yeah, we hit a dog at 37,000 feet. Whatever. There was an article called The Chemistry of Fear, explaining science behind brain's response to dangerous situations. It was posted in the Huffington Post in October of last year. It said this: do you love haunted houses? You can't get enough of horror movies? During the Halloween season, many thrill seekers enjoy getting spooked. But what's really happening in your brain when you scare yourself silly? Fear is the expectation or the anticipation of possible harm. Dr. Abigail Marsh, Associate Professor of Psychology at Georgetown University, says in a video, we know that the body is highly sensitive to the possibility of threat, so there are multiple pathways that bring that fear information into the brain. And which part of the brain is central to the fear pathway? The amygdala, an almond-shaped group of nerve cells that release neurotransmitters, chemicals that relay signals in the brain. Neurotransmitters trigger a cascade of responses in the body responsible for that fight or flight response. And that adrenaline rush that not only may be our key to survival in dangerous situation, but also may make scaring yourself so fun. Adrenaline raises your heart rate and blood pressure, gives you a boost of energy and alertness. Luckily, the brain dials down the amygdala's response and returns your system to normal if it recognizes that you're not actually in danger. And you can keep scaring yourself without getting too stressed out. Are you one of those people who's a thrill seeker? Man, I feel alive. I pushed the edge of the envelope and survived. Now I've got a big grin on my face. Are you one of those people? Area code 661, thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Zach.
Zach, thanks for calling the broadcast tonight. So what scares you?
One or two things. Recently in the like science news and stuff, they've been talking about how maybe they might want to, for sending people to Mars, they would want to, since it's an 8-month trip, how they want to put them to sleep. And I just thought of that concept of you're awake on Earth, and then you wake up and you're on a totally different planet, thousands of kilometers, hundreds of thousands of kilometers from home. I just think waking up would be kind of scary.
The idea that it's a one-way trip doesn't freak you out at all?
Yeah.
Hey, would you like to go and help populate Mars? By the way, you're never coming back. Does that freak you out at all?
Yeah. No, yeah. The waking up and just realizing you're so far away from home, you're never going back. That's what kind of scares me.
Cool. Anything else?
Walking in the like a park or woods at nighttime, not knowing what's exactly around you.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks so much for listening, and thanks for calling the radio show tonight. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, take it easy. I would wager that for a lot of people, the walking in the park, walking in the dark alley thing is scary, not because of the creatures they've seen on film, the horror movie icons that have become part of pop culture. The reason that they're afraid is because they read the news, and you hear about the people who get accosted and often seriously harmed, if not worse, in these dark places. It is the real world that to them is really scary, and there's some merit to that. You know, sometimes fear keeps us safe. It helps us to respect these tenuous situations, perhaps pushing us to make better choices. Don't walk in that alley. Don't go into this unlit park at midnight after curfew when you don't know who or what is out there. Don't do this. It's dangerous. Our fear is actually a healthy mechanism for being safe. Area code 512, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. This is Helena.
So glad you're calling the show tonight. We're talking about fear. What do you have for us?
I've got 4, 2 quick ones and 2 kind of bigger ones. The
All right.
2 smaller ones are fingernail and tooth trauma. I don't know where it came from, but like watching Annabelle this weekend and the sewing machine, I'm just like, I can't watch. It's not even the scary part, but I can't watch it because it's fingernails.
No, when they show the
And
fingers
then,
close to the needle on sewing machines in horror films, I do find
Yeah.
myself curling up into a ball because you know what's
I
going to
know,
happen
right?
next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, but hang on just a second. How was Annabelle? Like, I thought that The Conjuring was scary, but the reviews of Annabelle not great. How was it? Is it worth a ticket?
You know, it actually wasn't bad. It didn't really have a whole lot of supernatural, paranormally kind of stuff, like with the Sinister, for example. I haven't seen The Conjuring, so I'm not sure what's going on in that one. But it actually wasn't bad. My sister and I are huge horror buffs, and we go see these things all the time. So the last one we went to was Deliver Us from Evil, and that one was just awful.
Yeah, I heard it was
But Annabelle
terrible.
wasn't bad.
You didn't see The Conjuring, but you went to go see Annabelle?
Yeah, I know it doesn't make any sense. I have it on my queue of things I need to watch.
Look, before the end of October, there are very few films that kind of chill me, and I'm going to get crucified in the comments section by people who thought it sucked. It wasn't scary, blah, blah, blah. I thought The Conjuring, until the last 15 minutes, which wasn't great, but until then, is a terrific haunted house movie. I think you should rush out, watch it, turn the lights off, watch it with someone you love. I think you'll have a good time, okay?
I hope so. Could I tell you the other two?
Please do.
They're kind of weird. The other two fears. I have this thing called not sleep paralysis. I get that too, but sleep onset insomnia. So it takes a really long time to fall asleep. And every once in a while, I'll take a sleeping aid for it. And that weird swimmy feeling that you get in your head when it's working is just nightmare fuel for me. So I'll be laying there in bed and my brain will just go crazy. Like this past weekend, right before going to see Annabelle, I take this Clonopin to help me fall asleep. And then my genius decided that Slender Man was in my room. So I'm like, oh, hell no, because my brain's all going weird with the sleeping aid, and there's Slender Man staring at me from the corner.
Would you say there was one more?
The irrational fear that something will happen while I'm asleep, and that it will wake me up and be in my face.
I mean, it's out of your control. It's happening in the dark. There's a stranger in your private space. I think there's probably multiple layers to that particular fear. You bet.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for calling the show, and let me know what you think of The Conjuring, all right?
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for putting me on there. Bye.
Take it easy. All right, bye. I mean, it's subjective. You see, some people see one scary movie, and they're like, it was terrifying. Someone else sees the same film and says, this was crap. One of the perfect examples of that was back when the found footage phenomenon first started, the Blair Witch Project, right? Everybody was saying it's possibly the scariest film ever made. So I go on opening weekend. It's a packed theater. And I remember when it was over, I thought, who do I talk to get my money back? And I don't know if it was that the secret was already blown, you know, that because back then there was a real novelty to the found footage concept. Hey, man, they strung this together and released it as a documentary. Let's all go see it. And that gag worked for a little while. People thought they were watching something that actually happened. This was back before we became a little more sophisticated. But I mean, by the time I went, everybody knew. This is fiction. We're all going. And I walked out there and what a bunch of crap. And every time I see it listed in the horror section, I just think, you know, next. Waste of time. We were talking about the remake of the Halloween films directed by Rob Zombie on my Facebook page, and how I consider them to be an abomination unto man. I walked out of Rob Zombie's Halloween. I lasted 35 minutes, and I left. This is excrement. It's not scary. It's not true to the Michael Myers story. It's a waste of celluloid. I walked. I mentioned that on Facebook, and people came after me. John Carpenter, 1978. All right? That's it. That's the Holy Grail. That's the Mecca of horror films. Rob Zombie's not a film director, never was, never will be. All right? All right? Yeah. Chat room. I'm checking the chat room to see how much hate is had. No hate so far. Thank you. Thank you for that. Karen said she's frightened by big abandoned buildings with lots of rooms, like motels or schools, like in The Shining. Michelle said, I was raised very Catholic as a child. For fun on our days off of school, my aunt, who's more Catholic than the Pope, would drive us around on miracle hunts. I've seen just about every bleeding cross, weeping statue, and underpass Mary in the greater Chicagoland area. And even then, I didn't buy into all of it. My inner skeptic would always be thinking of non-magical ways to recreate whatever, quote, miracle I was witnessing, while on the outside, I prayed my rosary and pretended like I was mystified. On one such journey, when I was about 11 years old, that's 20 years ago, my aunt took us to see one of her celebrity priests celebrate Mass. She lists the priest's name. I'm going to skip the proper name. It happened at Our Lady of Sorrows. His big claim to fame was that he did faith-healing stuff at the end of Mass. He also claimed to see the face of Jesus come out at him when he was doing the consecration thing with the host. According to his followers, images would appear in the paintings above the altar while he was celebrating. I'd prepared myself for another boring day of pretending to be faithful so I could claim my reward at Baskin-Robbins, but this day was different. Mass itself went along as usual. I saw some hazy things that appeared projected on one of the paintings, but of course I told my aunt I saw the Virgin Mary. I pretended to half fall when it was my turn to be healed. Toward the end, as people were still waiting to be healed, I started to hear weird sounds coming from about 10 pews in front of me. I caught a glimpse of a small girl, probably a couple years younger than I, having some sort of fit. I don't remember what the trigger moment was, but soon a crowd had begun to form around the middle of the front pew in my aisle. For the first few minutes, there was a hushed confusion as the girl started to scream louder and make stranger shrieks. These were not normal child shrieks. They could have come straight out of a horror film. I heard high-pitched animalistic shrieks combined with low-pitched grumbling. When I asked my aunt what was happening, she said she didn't know, but that there were 4 ushers trying to hold a girl down in the front pew. She then began to pray that St. Michael prayer and indicated I should do the same over and over and over and over. The prayer caught on, the circle around the girl grew. Eventually it caught the attention of the priest who came down from the altar to investigate. As he approached the girl, she started babbling in an otherworldly voice. The closer he came, the more agitated she became. I remember hearing her shout, "I know who you are." But certainly not in a little girl voice. I was a little scared at this point, mostly because I didn't understand what was going on. And the only answer I was getting was, "Pray," when I asked. Pray. And as I prayed, I kept scanning the surroundings to see if I could find any hidden speakers or other indicators that this was fake. Kept my eyes on the ushers to make sure they didn't try to pull any tricks. I did everything I could to keep myself grounded in reality. A few minutes passed as he performed his priestly gestures and commands. I remember him shouting angrily at the girl, or I assume the demon inside the girl, to be gone and things like that. She began to quiet down and people stopped the St. Michael prayer in favor of singing. As the priest turned to walk away, a loud ringing sound began. I tried covering my ears and saw several other people do the same, but it was just as loud. It sounded like it was coming from inside my head. When I turned to ask my aunt, she just shook her head and began the St. Michael prayer again, but louder and more forceful. The unexplainable sound was the tipping point. I went from being uneasy to terrified. I don't remember how things went from that point on. I remember praying and for the first time in my life actually believing in it. I remember being so scared that I begged God not to let the demon jump into me. I also remember seeing my aunt acknowledge my terror but doing nothing to comfort me. She seemed almost proud that I was scared. At some point, the priest went to the tabernacle and grabbed a host. He did his voodoo with it, and the girl finally calmed down. I must have been in some sort of shock, because all I remember about the aftermath was hearing some old lady complain that she didn't get healed. I don't remember leaving the church or the drive home, or what I'm sure was a post-event discussion in the car. My aunt mentioned a couple weeks later that the girl was fine, but that was the last we spoke of it. It's still difficult for me to describe the terror I felt that day. Looking back on the event and knowing what I know now, I'm sure I could have solved the puzzle. It wasn't until high school that my logical brain reaffirmed itself and I stopped believing. Unfortunately, I still get the occasional nightmare about the experience. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your story. Amanda said, let me start off by saying I probably have one of the most irrational and strange fears you'll probably hear of tonight. Laugh if you will, I do. That being said, for as long as I can remember, I've been afraid of the floor possibly caving in. Me falling through and either being injured or dying. I have no reason to fear this. I've never had any sort of trauma happen as a child to base my fears on, so I don't even know why this is my biggest fear. When we're rearranging furniture, the floor rattles a little from people walking. My anxiety goes through the roof. It's very irrational, I know. I've tried to talk myself out of it my entire life and still can't seem to shake this fear. Second to that is my fear of dying. Sometimes I don't like going to sleep because there's always that chance that I won't wake up. I love my life. I don't want to die. Thanks for taking the time to read my email. I always like your Halloween season shows. Amanda in Ohio. Amanda, thanks for the email. Area code 207. You're on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast. Who's this?
Oh, this is Kevin.
Kevin, thanks for calling the broadcast tonight. Talking about what scares us. What do you have for us this evening?
Well, you know, when you talked about your fear of speaking in public,
yeah.
I've had that fear in the past. I don't have it so much anymore. But I remember when I was in high school and I stood up and I had to give a report in front of the class, and I just couldn't think straight. I tried to read what I had to read, and the more I read, the more I sweated, the more I sweated, the more I stuttered. And I think I drenched my shirt with sweat. And everybody, I think, was feeling sorry for me, but I just felt like crawling in a hole.
Yeah.
And but it's gone better for me since, and I appreciate you taking my call, because here I am talking in front of a whole bunch of people listening, who knows from where.
It sounds like you've overcome your phobia, man.
Well, thank you. It doesn't seem that way to me, but another fear I have had, and I don't know why, but and it's not one of these Halloween type fears, but probably more the same on the line of speaking, is if I'm writing a letter, which I do write letters sometimes, more or less I email now, but if I'm writing a letter and someone looks over my shoulder while I'm writing a letter or composing some article, my mind just goes blank. I just can't think. And I have to wait until that person walks away, and then I can get my thoughts back together. And I don't know what idiosyncrasy that is with me, why that happens, but that's one thing I seemingly can't overcome.
All right, making a note here. Never look over your shoulder while you're getting ready to. All right, got it. Mental note made, my friend, so we're all good. Well, hope your Halloween holiday is great, and thanks for listening, and thanks for calling tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great evening, Ted.
Take it easy. Marky said, I'm a big fan. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. This is the first time I've ever written. When I heard you were going to do a show about odd fears people have, I had to share. I understand how ridiculous it is, but I can't seem to shake it. I have a strange fear of someone breaking into my home with the sole intent to kill me and choosing to hide behind my pulled shower curtain as his method of hiding. I suppose this means he would literally catch me with my pants down, laughably so. Every single time I go to the bathroom, I push the shower curtain to make sure there isn't a body standing just on the other side. I can't bring myself to ever just pull the curtain back to look. I have to push it to see if it floats back, to reveal legs or something like that. I have no plan on what I do if I ever actually see someone. I'll probably just have a heart attack. Hey, the shower curtain thing is huge. A lot of people say if they go to someone's house for a party and they go into the bathroom, they look around the shower curtain to make sure that there is no one in the shower stall or in the tub behind the curtain. That is a thing, man. I guess a lot of people have a real fear of that. Such an intimate space. But a lot of people say that they have to look. They have to look. Andrew said about a year ago, 2 a.m, I got a little hungry. I decided to cook some French fries. I can't stand store-bought French fries, so I started peeling potatoes. I'd been reusing the same grease for about a week because I eat fries regularly, and I would just put a lid over the grease when I got done. Well, I just finished cutting the fries up, and I turned on the grease. I had to use the restroom, which took about 90 seconds. When I walked back into the kitchen, I arrived to see flames near the roof. I knew I had to get the grease out, so I reached through the flames and grabbed the pot. Flames above my head, grease boiling out of the pot. I ran about 20 feet to the door, swinging the pot from side to side to keep the grease off of me. I opened the wooden and screen door and threw the pot in the yard. Then I ran all the way across the house, grabbed an Afghan blanket to use as my fire extinguisher. After 5 minutes of beating the hell out of the stove and the cabinet above it, I finally managed to get the fire out. It was a close call, to say the least. And ever since that night, I have an irrational fear that I've left the stove, oven, or various other cookers running, even though I haven't cooked anything that day. I get a feeling of anxiety, and it will not cease until I go to the kitchen and check to make sure everything's turned off. This is especially terrible when I leave the house, to go on a trip, to turn around, because the anxiety is too strong. I know nothing is still on, but my feelings say otherwise. I try to be as rational as I can, but no matter how certain I am that nothing is still on, I can't shake the feeling. Andrew, thanks for sharing your story. Psychology Today did an article called "The Only 5 Fears We All Share." It was published on March the 22nd of 2012 by Carl Albrecht, Ph.D. The article says this, and I'll use it to close out our time together today. It says this: fear, like all other emotions, is basically information. It offers us knowledge and understanding, if we choose to accept it, of our psychobiological status. And there are only 5 basic fears, out of which almost all of our other so-called fears are manufactured. These are, number 1, extinction. The fear of annihilation, of ceasing to exist. This is a more fundamental way to express it than just calling it fear of death. The idea of no longer being arouses a primary existential anxiety in all normal humans. Consider that panicky feeling you get when you look over the edge of a high building. Basic fear number 2, mutilation. The fear of losing any part of our precious bodily structure. The thought of having our body's boundaries invaded, or of losing the integrity of any organ, body part, or natural function. Anxiety about animals such as bugs, spiders, snakes, and other creepy things arises from the fear of mutilation. Basic fear number 3, the loss of autonomy. The fear of being immobilized, paralyzed, restricted, enveloped, overwhelmed, entrapped, imprisoned, smothered, or otherwise controlled by circumstances beyond our control. In physical form, it's commonly known as claustrophobia, but it also extends to our social interactions and relationships. Basic fear number 4, separation, the fear of abandonment, rejection, and loss of connectedness, of becoming a non-person, not wanted, respected, or valued by anyone else. The silent treatment, when imposed by a group, can have a devastating psychological effect on its target. Basic fear number 5, ego death, the fear of humiliation, shame, or any other mechanism of profound self-disapproval that threatens the loss of integrity of the self. The fear of the shattering or disintegration of one's constructed sense of lovability, capability, and worthiness. That's all, just those 5. They can be thought of as forming a simple hierarchy, or feararchy. There's a chart here that has a pyramid at the top, ego death and separation, loss of autonomy, mutilation, extinction at the bottom. Think about the various common labels we put on our fears. Start with the easy ones. Fear of heights or falling is basically the fear of extinction, possibly accompanied by significant mutilation, but that's sort of secondary. Fear of failure, read it as fear of ego death. Fear of rejection, well, that's fear of separation, and probably also fear of ego death. The terror many people have at the idea of having to speak in public is basically fear of ego death. Fear of intimacy or fear of commitment is basically the fear of losing one's autonomy. Some other emotions we know by various popular names are just aliases for these primary fears. If you track them down to their most basic levels, the basic fears show through. Jealousy, for example, is an expression of the fear of separation or devaluation. She'll value him more than she values me. At its extreme, it can express the fear of ego death. I'll be a worthless person. Envy works the same way. Shame and guilt express the fear of or the actual condition of separation and even ego death. The same is true for embarrassment and humiliation. Fear is often the base emotion on which anger floats. Oppressed people rage against their oppressors because they fear or actually experience loss of autonomy and even ego death. The destruction of a culture or a religion by an invading occupier may be experienced as a kind of collective ego death. Those who make us fearful will also make us angry. Religious bigotry and intolerance may express the fear of ego death on a cosmic level, and can even extend to existential anxiety. Quote, if my God isn't the right God or the best God, then I'll be stuck without a God. Without God on my side, I'll be at the mercy of the impersonal forces of the environment. My ticket could be canceled at any moment without a reason. Some of our fears, of course, have basic survival value. Others, however, are learned reflexes that can be weakened or relearned. The strange idea that fearing our fears becomes less strange when we realize that many of our avoidance reactions, turning down an invitation to a party if we tend to be uncomfortable in groups, putting off a doctor's appointment, or not asking for a raise, are instant reflexes that are reactions to the memories of fear. They happen so quickly that we don't actually experience the full effect of the fear. We experience a micro-fear, a reaction that's kind of a shorthand code for the real fear. This reflex reaction has the same effect of causing us to evade and avoid as the real fear. That's why it's fairly accurate to say that many of our so-called fear reactions are actually the fear of fears. When we let go of our notion of fear as the welling up of evil forces within us, the Freudian motif, and we begin to see fear and its companion emotions as basically information, we can think about them consciously. And the more clearly and calmly we can articulate the origins of the fear, the less our fears will frighten us and control us. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's broadcast. Next week, it is our annual tradition of the Ghost Stories broadcast. Now that the show's over, don't forget to go over to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist to get your free sampler box of great tasting, wholesome snacks. Delicious stuff like baked sweet potato fries and so many more. naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. And I'll see you next week. Take care of yourself.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.